Hi guys, welcome back. This is chapter 11 with Professor Ren, and we're going to be going over the key points in this chapter. So we're going to start right here with fiscal policy. All of chapter 11 is about fiscal policy. What's really left to do more than anything is compare fiscal policy with monetary policy. Now, fiscal has to do with like the fiscal year, but I want you to think of fiscal policy as very Keynesian. And of course, the minute you hear Keynes, you think demand creates its own supply, and the key component is disposable income. So everything he's going to recommend in this chapter is about how the government should intervene, but intervene in a way that bolsters the buyer, so then the buyer can choose where to spend their money, how to spend their money, and then increase employment, and then employment goes up, income goes up, and then it continues more production, and so forth and so on. So what is fiscal policy? Fiscal policy is about how the government has two tools at its disposal. They are government spending, right here, government spending, and taxation. Now, because to Keynes, real disposable income is key, then it makes sense for us to understand that he is going to say, when he talks about taxes, he's talking about income taxes. He's not really going to be addressing autonomous taxes very much, because autonomous taxes change the price, and the ones that think that the economy is price-driven is actually classical economists, right? The classical theory of economics. So in this case, we're looking at taxation as in income taxes, mostly. I'm going to say mostly because there are always variations. And of course, government spending, because the government is in charge of its spending. If you remember, the economy is made up of four expenditures: the consumption, investments, government, that's the third one, and net exports. This is about that government that we're talking about. Now, we're still looking at the same macroeconomic objectives we've looked at way back in chapter 5. So whatever the government does, what Keynes is saying is they have to ensure the highest possible nation's output at the highest possible employment with the lowest possible inflation, right? That's what we're aiming to do always. Nothing has changed. Now, what are those tools? Those tools are the ones in the definition. They are government spending and they are taxes. Notice I say especially income taxes because this is Keynesian. Now, take this note here a little bit. What is it aimed at? It's aimed at achieving or at aggregate demand. So if we were to look at this, at achieving the top three macroeconomic objectives via aggregate demand, because that is really, really key right here. So this is why I have like a picture. Remember the shopper, it kind of helps you with your memory. Purchasing, and we're trying to focus and invest in this shopper. We want this shopper's income to feed this seller's profits, but we want her to make the decisions about how the money is going to be spent. And one thing I will remind you of is, remember to Keynes, there are way more buyers than there are sellers in an economy. Every seller is also a buyer, but not every buyer is a seller. So when you go to buyers, it is all inclusive. And also because consumption is the biggest expenditure for an economy. So this is fiscal policy. Now, I would like to compare it a little bit to monetary policy, because this chapter does, bring about monetary policy. Now, monetary policy is a little bit more of a classical kind of idea. Not that monetary policy cannot be used towards aggregate demand. It can. But often when we're talking about monetary policy, we really are talking about the seller more than we are the buyer. Monetary policy is about changes in the money supply. So this is how much money there is in the economy, or the value of money. So it can be aimed at aggregate supply often. Let's put it that way. So it can be aimed at aggregate demand, that's for sure. Now, we're still maintaining the same objectives. And in this one, I have put the vendor, right? I've put the owner of a business, and this owner of the business is whom we are more concerned about whenever we're thinking of monetary policy. So we're still establishing the same three objectives, and the tools are the quantity of money in an economy. When we say the money is supply, we mean how much money there is in the economy. And when we say the rate of exchange, we mean the value of money. And so this is very Federal Reserves, and this is very It's really not congressional. Congress is more in charge of fiscal policy. The decisions to change taxes and the decision to change spending is predominantly Congress. And when we say Congress or the House, the Capitol, we mean the Senate as well, because I'm sure you know that things often start in the House of Representatives, but the Senate has to approve them. Sometimes they start in the Senate, but the House has to approve them. But pretty much it's Congress that is mostly in charge of, what happens with fiscal policy. Monetary policy, in reality, politics drives a lot of what happens in the economy, including how much pressure, for instance, an administration might put on the Federal Reserves, but monetary policy is much more in the hands of the Federal Reserves. Okay, let's compare them a little bit. Who is in charge of fiscal policy? Congress, okay? The tools that are used, government spending and income taxes. Who is it aimed at? Think of it as aggregate demand more. Monetary policy. Who is in charge? The Federal Reserves. The amount of money supply, that's the first tool. The second tool is the value of money. This is all in your notes, by the way. It's all in the outlines with a lot more detail. But I just wanted to kind of do an overview, a verbal overview. And it concerns itself more with businesses. And we know this is the case because since this is about prices, and when you're talking about money and you're connecting the value of money is much more, it's going to impact the prices, then you're looking at an economy that concerns itself with keeping at equilibrium the prices, which means wages, interest rates, as well as the final prices of goods and services. Obviously, fiscal policy here is very Keynesian because it is concerning itself much more with the income that the government has, known as revenues collected from taxes, and how it should use it to bolster the income of the individual. Now, I'll remind you why disposable income, because it's the only income that you can also save and invest from, not just actually spend. So it's a very powerful type of income. Now here we come to the two types of fiscal policy. We have discretionary fiscal policy and we have automatic fiscal policy. Discretionary, what does it mean if a cop pulls you over and the cop doesn't give you a ticket? It means it was at their discretion to judge the situation and decide, I'm going to let you off with a warning or I'm going to give you a ticket, right? That's discretionary. Discretionary fiscal policy is much more powerful than automatic fiscal policy. It's a deliberate use of government spending and income, specifically income taxes, as tools. So Congress will hold a special session. They will say specifically, okay, so we need to do something. Either inflation is getting very high or the economy is kind of not getting stimulated enough. There isn't enough employment. There isn't enough spending. That's maybe the case. Maybe it's too leveraged. So we need to do something, and they will take specific measures. We've seen this happen in the past several years multiple times. Actually, what happened during COVID when everybody was getting checks in the mail, or most people, that was a deliberate use of expansionary discretionary fiscal policy, right? Now, automatic fiscal policy, think of an automatic car. When the engine is automatic, unlike a stick shift, this is very stick shift up here. Discretionary is very stick shift. You have to manipulate the gears up or down. Automatic, you kind of sit back and sip your coffee and your car decides, okay, I need to lower the gear to go uphill, or I need to, relax the engine and step on it and get on the highway. So in this case, those two tools, they don't change. The government spending and the taxes change, but they change automatically. I will come back to this point when we get to automatic fiscal policy. For now, remember, whether it's discretionary or automatic, it can either be expansionary or it can be contractionary. All expansionary policies pretty much aim to increase the real GDP. All contractionary policies aim to reduce inflation. We have to shrink the real GDP to shrink inflation. You have very interesting graphs that please go back to and look at them. But for now, what we are seeing here is that the aim is to reduce the inflation by causing a leftward shift in the real GDP. So nobody willingly wants to shrink the GDP without having to beat inflation down. And that would be the reason to do it. So whether it is discretionary or automatic, both can be expansionary, both can be contractionary. If it's expansionary, we're looking to increase the real GDP. If it's contractionary, we are looking to reduce inflation. Okay, I'm going to stop this video right here to keep it around 10 minutes, and I will see you in video 2.